first thing that I gotta lay down. All right, let me explain first. I got real involved in adventure racing. Does anybody kind of know what adventure racing is? I'll explain. All right, so you get a team, and sometimes it's 2 to 4 people. You get your buddies, whatever. You have this team. You start this race, and what they do, at least the ones that I did, they will give you coordinates for checkpoints that you have to get in a particular order, and it's throughout the race, which could be 12 hours to 4 days, depending, different size races and stuff. A lot of them I would do like 24-hour or 2-day races. So for 2 days, your team is trying to find these coordinates. Now what you're given, they tell you ahead of time the map that you're going to use. It's a topographical map, so it shows you elevations and stuff like that if you know how to read the map. And all they give you is just these coordinates. Here's, latitude and longitude of where this checkpoint is, this checkpoint, this checkpoint. You have to then take that, when they say go, you take that, you got to plot where all those points are on your map. Then you get your compass, a magnetic thing, and you navigate yourself to those points. Within the team, you always kind of designated a navigator. Here's our navigator. The rest of us, were just, people that are going. The object of the race is to finish the race with all of your team members. You have to stay together, and you have to finish this race. Now, the teams of all the races that I did, the teams that did the worst were either they had a strong navigator, and that's all they had. The rest of them had no idea where they're going, what they're doing. They're just following this dude, and he's doing his best, doing that. Or you had a navigator that didn't want to listen to the rest of the team. So the successful teams, while you did have a navigator, and it was his or her job to look at the map, plot, we'd all plot it out, but look at the map and say, okay, let's go this way, let's go this way, let's go this way. The successful teams would turn around to the team and go, what do you think? I'm thinking we should go this way. What do y'all think? All right, let's work together. Okay, so I just happen to be navigating right at the moment, but I'm looking at the teammates, and we are all in this together trying to get to the end of this race, okay? Especially when we're talking about marriage.
I'll just wait till next week to ask my questions.
Because here I am with all these long timers, and talking about marriage. But I'm no expert by any means, and what comes to mind when I think about this, and I think about in any time teaching something that I'm certainly no expert in, is the judge not lest you be judged. And that's not in saying, the way I've understood that is not saying don't judge, but be careful what you judge against. Be careful what you're pointing to. So while I may not be an expert, I'm pointing to God's word, and we're all going to look at that together, and we're going to pick it apart. So the first one, wives, submit to your own husbands. We can be done. No, not really. Wives, submit to your own husbands as to the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, as also Christ is the head of the church. And he is the Savior of the body. Therefore, just as the church is subject to Christ, so let the wives be to their own husbands in everything. Husbands, well, let's first look at that. I know in studying this, when you even back up a bit, we see, that God is not telling us, you know, to rule over our wives and to dominate our wives and to, they better shut up and do what we say, or, you know, or have the wrath of God on them or anything. But as Christians, we're to be holding each other accountable, men and women, husbands and wives, in ways, and pointing to this is what God says, this is what we should be doing. Often I hear this Ephesians in reference to how wives should be, and they only go that far. You know? Stop at 24, verse 24. You know, therefore, just as the church, let the wives be to their husbands and everything. It's the next part that kind of the other shoe drops. Husbands, love your wives, just as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for her, that he might sanctify and cleanse her with the washing of water by the word, that he might present her to himself a glorious church, not having spot or wrinkle or any such thing, but that she should be holy and without blemish. Right off the bat, I mean, just as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for her. Think about what Christ did for the church, what he did for us, what he did for our salvation, us being the church. And he's now saying, husbands, that's what we should do for our wives. Does anybody have any ideas on how that would flesh out in day-to-day life with your spouse? What do y'all think? Any husbands? How would you give yourself for her?
Well, there's a lot of ways, and the idea there obviously is sacrificial love, right? He gave himself, so, you know, it would include making sacrifices, doing things that you might not particularly want to do, and that is part of that. And on the other hand, what I try to do with Kelly is to look for ways that I could, I can kind of see things that if she was there, she would take care of them herself. But if I can lift her load a little bit, and she's out and about, and I can do something, well then, that's a way I can show her love. I can give myself for her. And then, also Dan, you got there in verse 26, to sanctify her. Sanctify her, let's see what this little 7 is. Okay, it's what I think it was. Set it apart. Cleanse her with the washing of water by the word. So I need to be kind of like a vessel to her, and be sharing things that are biblical and scriptural, and just interact with her about things. And I'm thankful that like every morning Kelly's listening to God's word, and she's listening to Bible teaching, and that's a blessing to me. And so, but we're there, obviously we need to have a cleansing effect, because Jesus wants to present himself a glorious church. He wants the church to be holy. Hey guys, how you doing?
Hello.
Good to see you. This is Kendrick and LaHornia, and I've gotten to know them over the last few weeks, so it's good to see y'all. So anyway, you know, you got two factors there. You got the sacrificial love, and then you got that cleansing effect that you have on them. And obviously that doesn't mean, like you said, to stand there and wave your finger and say, hey, you know, you're not doing this right, and you're not doing that right, and you're not doing this right, and that kind of thing. It would be by example, and then maybe by discussion and things like that. So that's just a few ways. There's a lot more.
In 28, you know, it goes on. So husbands ought to love their own wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself, and that speaks to that sacrificial. Well, when you like you were saying, Bob, you might not. You might do things you don't necessarily want to do, you know, as part of the sacrifice, but even more so, you may not do things that you want to do. You know, like something that comes to mind in a way that can be sacrificing yourself, giving yourself to her is, you know, I want to pursue, you know, professional skateboarding. Instead, I'm going to take a job and work and provide for my family. You know, and maybe I really want to do that, but this is what takes care of my family and takes care of my wife, and so I die. Death. Die. I die to that, and I go to that. Now that can be, you know, a heavy example, but every day we have those opportunities to do that. Every day we have opportunities to go. I would love to not do the dishes or the laundry or whatever and just let her do it or something, you know, but no, I'm going to do what I don't want to do, and do that. I'm going to not play that game or, you know, get stuck in YouTube for hours instead. I will die to that, and I will, yeah, that's a way we can do that. And I can tell you, what I have found is, while it's difficult sometimes to get to that point, you know, to just get myself to, okay, all right, I'm just not going to have whatever this is I want, and instead provide here or do this for her. While it's difficult to get there, it never feels bad after. It has never felt bad, you know, like, oh, you know, that was such a pain. I wish, you know, it always feels good. I have found it always feels good to lift her up, you know, and to support in every way I can do. It's just sometimes hard to get there. For no one ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes and cherishes it, just as the Lord does the church. For we are members of his body, of his flesh, and of his bones. For this reason, a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. This is a great mystery. That cracks me up. But I speak concerning Christ and the church. Nevertheless, let each one of you in particular so love his own wife as himself, and let the wife see that she respects her husband. So, one little side thing to notice there in that whole passage, it's talking about marriage. 2 little verses for the wife, and that whole mess of the rest for the husband. There is quite and not just in quantity of verses, but those verses hold some heavy stuff. When you think about marriage and you're becoming one flesh, that doesn't just mean, you know, the physical part of the marriage. It's God is looking at us as one. And when you think about that and how you're interacting with your wife from a standpoint of being a leader, being a spiritual leader, and sanctifying her, presenting her, with the washing of the water by the word, that you might present her a glorious church. That's a big responsibility for us husbands to to hold that. And again, coming back to, you know, what I was talking about with the adventure races, it's not profitable to plow ahead and dragging her along. You know what I mean? Like, this is what we're doing. We're going, and this is how I see God, you know, speaking to us, and this is what it's going to be. And I don't care what you say. There's interaction there. At least I feel like that has to be there, because you don't ignore, you know, when it's your one body, just like you don't hate your body. It's not like I'm right-handed, so I'm just gonna ignore my left side and not ever consider it whatsoever, you know, and I'm gonna end up shutting the door, and it's gonna be dragging on the ground behind me, and you know, it's gonna.
Hey Dan, tonight on the Channel 8 News at 6 o'clock, one of the male anchors, he didn't even realize that he did it. But right on the air, his wife had to go to China for some reason, and she had a bunch of, what she did is she was in a cab, and she paid the cabbie, and apparently she had a real high denomination, and he gave her all these $100 bills back or something like that, like $100 Chinese bills. And he gave her all of these back, but they were fake. And so when he got back home, but right on the news, the man said, you know, I told my wife, man, I should have been there in that cab with you. I can't believe that you let that happen. It wouldn't have happened if I had been in there. And I was just thinking, oh boy, when he gets home tonight, man, there's gonna be cold food on the table, man. I mean, that was. I didn't say anything, but Kelly said.
I heard it. I said a few words.
Yeah. She just
You
said.
couldn't hear my advice.
But, you know, basically, she just said, boy, you know, that man just basically told the world that he thinks his wife was stupid.
Yep.
You know, and it's true, and that's right, what we're talking about here. You know, we really need to say, hey, listen, when I was single, I only had one brain running my life. Now I got two brains running my life, and I should do a lot better, because I get perspective. I can run things by my spouse, and we can both put our heads together.
Yep.
And again, it's not talking about that we, as men, shouldn't be leaders and things like that, but
No.
it is talking about what we, remember last weekend I had talked to you about this, that hot thing at the top in blue, submitting to one another.
Right.
Before God ever says, wives, submit to your husbands, he says, we're all supposed to be submitting to one another. That means there's a mutual love, a mutual respect. Yeah, God puts the husband over the wife, and the husband and wife over the children. God sets up the hierarchy, but that doesn't mean you don't interact and you don't interact with each other or submit to one another in the fear of God. Fearing God means that we have that parallel, those parallel lines we talked about last week, that we're one another. So, all right, go ahead, Dan. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, that's fine. So, what I would like to hear from you guys, just a bit, and what I'd like to hear is take, I want to hear from the wives, and I want to hear from husbands. Or I want to hear from women and men. Even if you're not married, you know, I want to hear what you think it would be for the women. What would it be to submit to your own husbands? What does that mean to you? What does that feel? What is that? What's some examples you can think of? They don't have to be what you do necessarily.
Well, for one thing, in the public arena, when you're with your husband, he should be the leader and the decision maker. But that doesn't mean that you haven't already had a conversation at home about some things, especially like, let's say if we're going shopping, you know, we've got some limits on what we're gonna spend and things like that, and there should have been a discussion before you go out into the public, and there should be some understanding, because one of the things here is what we model to the public as believers. I mean, how do you know the believer husband-wife from the everyday husband-wife when you go out into the marketplace? Do they all look the same? You know, or is there some kind of order? Is there something that when you look over there and that couple is there, you know, the husband may back up if it's the woman shopping for a dress, but they've already had a discussion on how much she's gonna spend on that dress, you know, and the husband should give an opinion on a dress if she's buying a dress, you know, but you don't say, does this look fat on me? He goes, yes.
The answer is always no.
But he could use kinder words like saying, I don't think that color goes with your skin. But there should be order, and when you're in the restaurant, when you're choosing what you're going to eat, or how much you're going to spend on what you're going to eat. The husband should be the one, in most cases, ordering, to some extent, if it's like a general order, but now they've got it where the person comes and asks everybody. But I remember when we were first married and we go out somewhere, my husband would do basically order the food. I would tell him what I wanted, but he would do the ordering. And he would say, well, she wants da 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 da, and I'll have da 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 da. So there was still order in it.
I used to do that, but she got tired when I'd say to the waiter, I'd like the filet mignon and bring her a bowl of rice. She stopped that after a while. She didn't like that.
Just leaving the money.
But just good, positive communication skills when you're out in public, showing the authority, because order, and the weirder the world is getting, the more order as Christians we should have in our lives, because if we don't hold on to some of these things until we get over this bump that we're in right now, once you get over the bump, you still gotta have some people to go back to some kind of norm. I mean, we always know that there are bumps in the road, but then when things settle down, if nobody know the norms, how do we get back to the norms? How do we get back to a society that's, orderly and peaceful? So I think that, we just really need to, as Christians, we need to acknowledge, and, I keep praying for more men in the church, because it's almost like you look around, it's like, where are the men? And especially in the African American churches, there's the group that runs the church, but then after that, there's like, you look out there and there's, it's a 5-to-1 ratio, women to men. So we just need to get back to that concept of, living orderly lives.
No, all right. So, men, what's it look like as far as verse 25? Husbands, love your wives, just as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for her.
It mean, when you say submit, first of all, I put it in my everyday living,
Sure, well, you can look at a situation where you, like you were saying, you wanna lift your wife up, you wanna get her to the next level. 2 approaches you could take.
But see, in
You're
that-
being stupid. Stop being stupid. You just, do the thing. Or, I love you. How can I help you? You can try to get to the same thing, but you're gonna have 2 different results.
Yeah,
When you.
different generation, back when I was coming up, you would take your girlfriend to your mother. The mother would pretty much let you know.
Yeah.
What kind of, she'll call you in there and ask you, don't hurt this girl, where's Adrian, where's Ernie?
You'll be dealing with mama if you do hurt that girl.
You got that A-OK.
I think that's real important, Dan. In fact, I used to try to communicate to Dorothy with, kindness and respect. For instance, when we were having a meal, I wanted more tea. I wouldn't say, get up and give me more tea. I'd just rattle my glass.
I'm sure that worked out for you
Yeah,
real good.
I taught that in my seminar.
Dan, I remember years ago, when our kids were little, hearing the principle, that, we can only serve one master, that will love one and hate the other, and one despise the other. And that principle goes in the home too. The father is the man is the head of the home. And the children need to know that the rules that dad, like dad says, listen, in this household, everyone in this household is going to go to church Sunday morning or whatever it is. And then it's the mother's job to set all the rules in place so that happens. You're gonna turn off the TV, you're gonna do this, you're gonna be in bed by this time so you can get up on time and be here. Or, you're not gonna go out with your friends on Saturday, or whatever it is. So in that way, the man's the head of the home, and the woman's submitting to her husband by basically bringing in the follow-through to make that happen.
Yeah. And when you're looking at these principles of wives submitting to your own husbands and husbands loving your wives, it's a synergistic thing as well. And it's far easier to submit to something when you know that sacrificial love is coming back, is coming in return. And the same way, it's a lot easier to sacrificially. It's a lot more compelling to sacrificially love when that submission is happening. And again, it's not a yes master, whatever you say kind of submission. It's a I will defer to it. Yeah.
Yes, you said, submission to me, one word, and you had on the board, everything respect. With respect, you got everything.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
You can't use that.
Yep.
All right, so at this time, Mahoney is gonna stand and sing respect.
Let's
go. R-E-S-P. Dan, can I throw up a verse real quick?
Yeah.
And I think you were there that Sunday that I taught on this, but I did a paper on this, and I'll just do it real quickly. But so many people miss this in Psalm 45. Psalm 45 is the wedding psalm, and it's a song of love. Notice up there at the top, a song of love, and the psalmist says, I'm going to recite my composition concerning the king. This is the king of Israel. Then, of course, we find out later it's the King of Kings, Jesus. But when it was written for the King of Israel on his wedding day. And believe it or not, just like a pastor gives a charge to the bride and groom today, there's a charge to the groom from verses 2 or 3. Well, starting with 2, he brags on the king there. You're more handsome than the sons of men. Verse 3, gird your sword on your thigh. So all the way from 3, all the way down to verse 9, he's talking about all the things. He's given the king a charge. and saying, hey king, here's what's so awesome about you, and here's some things you need to be doing. And then when you get to verse 10, the psalmist turns to the bride. And by the way, the bride is a Gentile. But it says, listen, O daughter, and consider and incline your ear. So the king of Israel is marrying a Gentile bride. By the way, the King of Kings took a Gentile bride. Okay? He tried to take a Jewish bride, but did that work? No. And same here. And it says here, listen, O daughter, and this is the psalmist talking, kind of giving a pep talk before she consummates her marriage with the king of Israel. Consider and incline your ear. Forget your own people also, in your father's house, so the king will greatly desire your beauty. Did you see his words of wisdom for the queen? She's a young, foreign bride. Probably here it's talking about Tyre. Probably she could be from Tyre. But anyway, the king of Israel is marrying this foreign bride, and he says, listen, if you want to have a great marriage, you need to leave your father and mother. Just like Genesis says, you shall leave your father and mother, and you shall cling to your spouse. The two of you will become, forget your own people, your father's house also. See, that's why they think it's a Gentile bride. Forget your own people. They didn't say, hey, forget the Jewish people. They forget your own people. You're living in a new country now. And it says there in verse 11, so the king will greatly desire your beauty. And then what's interesting, it says, because he is your Lord. And in that day, of course, that would be, they capitalize it here, but it could be little l as well. Because he is your Lord, worship, and it really means do obeisance to him, do obedience to him, submit to him. And then there's some advantages to that. The daughter of Tyre will come with a gift. You serve the king and you love him, and you're going to get rich. The rich among people will seek your favor. And so he's giving words to the queen. But I love this where it says here, focus, verse 10, forget your family and your people. Focus on your spouse. The king will greatly desire your beauty. What a beautiful thing. What it's saying there to this new bride is, listen, if you make him your focus, he'll make you his focus. He'll greatly desire your beauty. And then he tells her, not only is he your husband, he's your Lord. He's the sovereign of the country. And therefore you should submit to him just like everybody else in the country submits to him. He has a high role, and you are to do that obeisance to him. And of course, we can apply this to the Lord Jesus. If we obey Jesus, Jesus says, I'll come and make my home with you, and I'll manifest myself to you. The king will greatly desire our beauty, that the beauty we're showing to him, he's going to turn around. So anyway, this is there's so much here in Psalm 45 that you could go into all the nuances. But anyway, it's just a great compliment to Ephesians 5. It's an Old Testament Ephesians 5.
Well, I wanna leave us with a blueprint, kind of more so for the husbands, but it really applies both husbands and wives. But the example of Christ. Think about what Jesus did for the church. All right, and in this, Christ also loved the church and gave himself for her. And you think about what he did. What he did not do is, once that, and he actively pursued that until the end, until the ultimate. Gave himself in his physical life and in the eternal beyond, which is difficult to understand. But that's what he did. I would say, as husbands, let us use that as a blueprint and be intentional. A very common quote that I love is, the opposite of love is not hate, it's indifference. That is truly the opposite of We can do so much more damage as husbands when we are just become indifferent and get that crust around our heart, and we're just not, present and intentional for our wives. And the wives can do the same thing in pursuing, God's plan for how our marriage is supposed to work. Just being intentional about it. Yes, we're gonna make mistakes. In the adventure races that I did, we often went the wrong direction, and everybody, but we were all part of that wrong direction, and we corrected, and we went the right way. The bad, like I said, the teams that did bad, they went the wrong direction. They weren't together. This one's going to blame that one. The team falls apart. They're screaming at each other, and they're lost. So let's be intentional about our husbands and wives.
Dan, I think it says in Amos, lest two be agreed, they can't walk together. And that's why it's so important, even with Christians, they need to have some communication. In other words, these are things they need to discuss before they get married.
Yeah.
Not get married and find out the wife says, submit fully, and he says, go your own way.
Yeah.
It's communication.
Yep.
Gotta have it.
Yep. Definitely.
Hang on.